Welcome to Property Deconstructed with Mark Arichello and Pat Panetta. Here we are again, Mark.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Pat. Thanks for having us on again, mate. It's always great to see you.
It is, mate. And I guess the summary of this podcast and video cast, it's sort of delving into the world of property. If you're thinking about purchasing a property, if you're thinking about, just living in your home and just living in Australia and Melbourne in your property, we cover that world.
Yeah, the collective wisdom, if you like, and navigating the storm and the technical aspects of property and outlook for the future. So the guests help us understand that on a higher level as well.
Yes. Let's welcome our guest who's here joining us now in the studio or via video link. Evan Mulholland MP. He is the Shadow Minister for Home Ownership and Housing Affordability and the Shadow Minister for Outer Suburban Growth. Welcome to Property Deconstructed. Hi there, Evan.
Thanks for having me, Pat Mark.
Now, it's so interesting, property at this point of time, because it's sort of at the forefront of everybody's mind, especially locally in Melbourne and Victoria, Mark. The Reserve Bank, at the time of recording, have made a change again, increasing the interest rates. So people are talking about the property market and where it's all going.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks so much for joining us, Evan, as well. And I asked Evan to be on the show. I really like the discussions and the from the political side and what Evan represents with the Liberal Party in Victoria. When it comes to housing affordability, housing ownership in the future, and so yes, the interest rates definitely have an effect on the sentiment and the hope, I guess, affecting the sentiment and the hope for home ownership. But also, there's been for private property investment and taxes. There's been a few wins this week as well, Evan, in Parliament when it comes to the vacant land taxes too. But talk to us a little bit more about what you've been doing in the last 12 months in those spaces.
Excellent. So I got elected in November last year at last year's election, and since then I've had a big focus on home ownership and the inherent value of home ownership in having a stake in your community, but also enables you to have a stake in the economy as well, and how important that is for young people. It's the top issue. There's no bones about it for my generation as a millennial MP. So I've been quite forthright, both in my maiden speech and in the media as well, on the need to provide more supply. We know through basic economics in supply and demand that the more of something, the cheaper it's going to be. And if we place restrictions on growth and restrictions on supply, that's going to have a price side effect as well. And also, a main barrier to home ownership for many young people is state government taxes. Now, Victoria has the highest property taxes in the country, and stamp duty in particular is a real barrier, but also as well. So there's a lot of reform piece to do, and I've been persistent in my pursuit of the government over doing more about housing, about home ownership, and creating more supply, but also not burdening the sector and therefore burdening the consumer with ever increasing property taxes.
No, that's great. And did you have a question then, Pat? Or?
Well, I was thinking, you're right there. You sort of want to get the balance right as far as creating an incentive for people to get into the marketplace. How do you do that, but also address this ballooning debt? I guess the current government are taxing everybody, land tax and stamp duty, because there's this sort of irresponsible way of spending money. So how do you sort of strike that balance and not sort of create a disincentive?
Well, that's right. And at the moment, investing in property is a disincentive. It's not just some imaginary person that rents out your property to you and creates that rental availability. We went from, when this government was elected, there was about 12,000 homes available for rent in Melbourne. And despite a growing population, there is now about half that at around 6,300. So you've got a growing population and less rent supply for people to be able to get in even the rental market. So it's a massive issue. And what the government's done through increasing property taxes is make property an uncertain investment. And I know through speaking to my local real estate agents, but knowing through other bodies like the investment professionals, property investment professionals of Australia survey, that 1 in 4 property investors in Victoria are getting out of the market because the changes in taxes, both the land tax changes in the government, these new vacant property taxes that they've just tried to pass, is making property an uncertain investment and making property something that people don't want to get into anymore and people want to get out of. So you're seeing a massive jump in the amount of people, for example, that are seeking legal services to take on their tenants for being kicked out. But investors on average earn $100,000 a year. They're mum and dad property investors that also feel interest rates, that feel those state government taxes. And everything affects new first home buyers, also affects property investors as well. So as you were saying, Pat, we do need to strike the right balance in making sure we're getting more investment into our housing market, not less.
Yeah, it's it is disturbing because we do, being in property myself, but and even with the Real Estate Institute of Victoria that I've been a member of for many years, there was a similar survey, similar to what PIPA, the Property Investment Professionals, produced. The RLV surveyed through its members a lot of the investors that were, especially after the state budget announcements, where they had more uncertainty about where they sat with their investment property. Then the constant interest rate rises. There was over 72% increase in investors from the Real Estate Institute members that were inquiring about selling this spring or in the new year, and have already listed since. So there is an exodus, which will need to be controlled in the short term to hold that housing supply. And that's separate from the 10-year social housing plans and housing statement. That's a great ambition, even if half of it gets reached. But we need that immediate retention to let those investors hang in, and they do. The private sector does represent about 70% and greater of the investment property supply. And we see it even with rental departments now, the amount of new residents, new migrants coming here looking for work that can't even find a rental property. So then that restricts them from getting sound employment as well. So it's a double-edged sword.
So where is it all going? I guess, we've got this rental sort of squeeze with the supply isn't there, immigration, greater demand, investors are leaving the marketplace. Yeah. It sounds sort of doom and gloom. Where's it going here in Victoria? Can we straighten up this road?
Well, there's a few things we can do. First thing, we need to restore confidence in the residential construction sector. We've seen residential constructing companies like Porter Davis and others go under, and that has dented the confidence in the industry in Victoria. We're seeing all sorts of issues out of the wash-up of that. And a lot of these issues in our construction sector that build new homes is being caused by the unsequenced waste and mismanagement from the government's own big build that is inflating the price of materials, the price of supplies, and the price of labour. Why would you be a bricklayer for home build when you can earn double the amount on a big construction site? And so there's really big issues flowing on from that is inflating the cost of housing. So I think, if the government wants to prioritise housing, and we've seen that through its flashy housing statement, then we're going to need to reach that 80,000 homes a year, 220 homes a day, every day, including weekends and public holidays for the next 10 years, then there's going to need to be some serious changes in order to be able to meet that. We've suggested something like housing targets, which we would work with councils and local communities to set targets in for growth. We need to incentivise growth as well, so that there is incentives for both builders, but also local communities to be accepting of growth and accepting of more supply. In releasing the housing statement, the former Premier said that the status quo is not an option. But if you look at all the figures since Labor were elected since 2014, then they're responsible for the status quo. We're seeing, a dramatic reduction in home building since 2014. We're seeing a dramatic increase in rents since 2014. Since 2014, the average price of a home was about $650,000. Now it's about $1.2 million. So we're seeing all these increases in costs because the government has sat on its hand on the supply side issue and not recognised the need to grow and the need to factor in that economic equation of supply and demand to keep costs down and prioritise getting people into homes.
It's a huge task, and it's and as far as incentives right now, or managing the taxes and property taxes right now, it's probably a larger obstacle. But there were some of the real estate institutes that participated in some research to suggest that if you on a federal level increased GST nationally, you could almost abolish stamp duty at the state level and still not compromise any of the state's revenue, which was at about 50% or greater in Victoria with property taxes.
Yeah, I took part in the parliamentary inquiry into land transfer duties, the stamp duty inquiry.
Yes.
There's certainly a lot of good arguments in favour of getting rid of stamp duty, but there are things the government could be doing now to alleviate the pressure of first home buyers. One of those is the concession thresholds. The concession thresholds were set around a decade ago.
Yeah.
At $650,000 for stamp duty free, and then tapered off to $750,000 for a discount. Now, that is creating a massive distortion in the market. People are making decisions based on those thresholds. And if you look at those thresholds, all you can either get for that amount is a small inner city apartment or a house and land package in a growth area that doesn't have the infrastructure required to be livable.
Yes.
And so you've got a real issue with those thresholds. And I would suggest one thing the government can do is increase those thresholds to match and index those thresholds to match what the property market is seeing at the moment.
And the reason they're not changing those thresholds is because the revenue, the tax that's coming in from it?
The state's broke.
Yeah.
And we see decisions like rushing into the Commonwealth Games, then having to cancel it. That's cost $600 million. We're seeing on infrastructure projects, blowouts alone are now costing over $30 billion. This all creates an impact into the kind of things we can do for people in the future. And we always talk about when the government wastes, that's bad for people and bad for Victorians because it will result in increased taxes. And we are now seeing those increased taxes. We saw the housing statement. It was quite flashy.
Yeah.
The government signed a housing affordability partnership with the industry. And almost a week into their housing statement, basically tore up that partnership by announcing a whole raft of new taxes, including applying the vacant property tax across the state. The industry, I know the RAIV had things to say about that.
Yes.
And the Property Council did as well, said the affordability partnership was in tatters, because if you sign a partnership saying you want to work with industry, you want to work with stakeholders to create more supply and put pressure down on house prices, then that needs to be genuine and that needs to be a two-way street. It doesn't mean springing new taxes on the property sector at a Property Council breakfast. It means engaging thoroughly with the sector. The sector and property investors are not an endless piggy bank for the government to pinch from. Taxes on property have real world effects, and we see from that RAIV survey and from other surveys that investors are looking elsewhere. Investors are looking to get out, and when they do sell up their properties, that means that rental, in large part, gets turned into other uses. It might be bought by a first home buyer. It might be turned into short stay accommodation, which means less rental supply on the market and greater increases in rents. And means that queue going around the corner of people trying to get into a rental gets even longer.
Yeah, and they're the consumers, and the renters at that of the end product are the ones feeling the pressure, and not even. Yeah, if you're fortunate to get a house over a roof over your head, but what about the mental health and the other hardship caused to households by it as well? So by not finding a property or a home to live in.
Right.
So, but yeah, Evan, if you can, there's a lot to unpack here. We'd like to sort of invite you to stay on for a second episode as well, because this has been fantastic. But we like to dig deeper into what you're doing as well.
Yes.
And Pat, unless you had something to finish off.
No, that's a good spot to end it there, and we'll go away for a tick and come back here with another episode for our listeners. You guys can catch up, because we're going to say that there's some sort of connection here, some distant cousin or relations, or
there is, there's through the Italian bloodline. So Evan is your nonna and my mother are first cousins. So we're
that's right.
Yeah, we're
right.
or grandmother for the non-Italian listeners.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll go away for a tick. You guys can catch up, and we'll come back with another episode of Property Deconstructed with Marco O'Callo, Pat Panetta, and our special guest, Evan Mulholland, MP.